This is Will Power's Inverse News, Nostalgia for the Present. It is Wednesday, June 3rd at 6:33 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And who is sowing the seeds of divisiveness and hatred? The left will tell you Donald Trump is to blame for the violence related to the riots. He took too long to address the nation, and his address was all about law and order and few words about George Floyd. On PBS NewsHour, Judy Woodworth asks former mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter, about Trump getting tougher on the rioters.
But Judy, you alluded to something, and I want to take it head on. But there are some people at these protests whose interests are not about Mr. Floyd, whose interests are not about black people, whose interests are not about equity and justice. There are people who want destruction, they want chaos, they want confusion, and they meld into some of these crowds, and the next thing you know, you have chaos. Now, Donald Trump likes chaos, and he likes this environment because he can now play to his political base that he has to keep these people in control. This is a political game that he's playing, and we're talking about life and death, the life and death of people and the life and death of communities.
So Mr. Nutter fails to mention, after Donald Trump saw the tape where the officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck, the president was horrified and called on the FBI and AG Barr to launch a full investigation. So to say he likes chaos and the riots because they are giving him a chance to play to his political base is skewed, to say the least. Of course Trump is talking about keeping these people under control. They are looting, burning, and committing acts of violence. A number of police officers have been killed, as you can see in this story from ABC. David Dorn, 77, was discovered on the sidewalk in front of Lee's Pawn and Jewelry in St. Louis around 2:30 a.m. Las Vegas police officer was shot Monday night attempting to disperse a crowd of protesters outside a casino, authorities said. An officer was attacked in New York City, and 4 cops were shot in St. Louis. And that's just a small sampling of the death and destruction around the country. And even more protesters have been killed, so these riots have turned deadly and anything but peaceful. To the left, it's not about the rule of law. It's not about injustice and unfair police tactics, although the media whores pay lip service to those ideals. It's about whatever helps get rid of Trump in 2020. That is good to them. And seeing the country torn apart is bad for Trump unless he gets it under control. So naturally, they criticize him for the crackdown, for trying to get things under control. In fact, many on the left are actively encouraging the looters and violence and destruction of property. Former San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick said on Twitter that the cries for peace will rain down. And when they do, they will land on deaf ears because your violence has brought this resistance. We have the right to fight back. CNN's Chris Cuomo defended the rioters, declaring the protesters are not required to be peaceful. Unfortunately for Cuomo, the Constitution disagrees with him. You have a right to peaceful assembly, not rioting, not looting, not murder. And there are many more examples. Many on the left are advocating for more violence and destruction as long as it isn't in their communities. This progressive writer was advocating for more violence and destruction, but until it came a little too close to home. A news editor for a small independent newspaper, Indie Week, in North Carolina was in support of the protest turned riots until they broke into the paper's office and she had to take cover from the looters and vandals in the basement. I mean, hypocrisy isn't even a concern for these people in their vicious attempts to get Trump. So, no matter what happens, the left-wing media will immediately assign blame to the other side and Trump in particular. However, when you look at all the trouble spots in the country, you see most of the protesting and looting, burning, and so forth is being done in democratically controlled cities. New York, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles County, San Francisco, Oakland, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Portland, Oregon, Memphis, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, Madison, Wisconsin. All democratically controlled cities like Denver, Colorado, and Boston, Massachusetts. But to be fair, violence has erupted in Republican-controlled cities too, like Oklahoma City and Scottsdale, Arizona. But the worst violence occurred in democratically controlled cities, and most of the violence has been in democratically controlled cities. What does destroying property and stealing things accomplish? Whoever is doing this is destroying any possibility the general public will sympathize with their cause. That is not just my opinion. Most people are moderates who sympathize with the murder of George Floyd, but when they see people taking advantage of the situation and looting, their sympathies change from Floyd to the police. A new poll by Morning Consult found that large majorities of American voters, including a majority of Democratic voters, backed the use of the National Guard to address the riots and protests tearing apart cities around the nation. A smaller majority of Americans supports using the military. So the group of people everyone is fighting for loses the argument, the Afro-American community. And this is the cycle that is repeated every time there is a riot and property damage. The Watts riot, the Rodney King, can we all just get along riot did nothing to advance the agenda of the African American community, especially in the low-income districts. And you can see for the first time these riots are expanding out from just one locale to all across the nation. And this isn't about race, this is about economics, about poor people and rich people. The poor people, the poorer districts are feeling more frustration and more anger, and there the problems are worse. So who wants to keep it that way? The Democrats, because they flourish when everyone is poor and dependent on them. But if you don't ever expect to be lifted out of poverty by any Democrat, because they will make all kinds of promises and deliver nothing but oppression and more poverty. That's their way. That's how they gain power, by keeping people poor and dependent on them. This is Will Powers. Thank you for listening. My email address, if you want to contact me, is mountaincharlie@sbcglobal.net, and my website is mojomorning.blogspot.com.